All right, we have a ton of stuff to get through today. Lots and lots. Relationship management. Everybody read the article. As you guys go through this program, the PR program, you will see this article again and again. This is pretty much a seminal article, right? Explicating relationship maintenance. It's a seminal article because it is basically a foundation for a new, like a paradigm shift in public relations. We're moving from these theories of mass communication and looking at the communication as a unit of measurement, and moving into relationships. We're looking at, well, how's our relationship between different people? Thanks, Dr. Hart. All right, now here's the heads up. I don't think we're going to get through the entire PowerPoint because I want to get to the group activity. If we don't get through the entire PowerPoint, you're still on the hook for it because I guarantee this is going to be on the exam, which is next Thursday. Is that right, next Thursday? Okay. So you're on the hook for it. Download it, read it, study it because it's going to be on the exam. So, again, what are all those theories that we talked about on Tuesday have in common? What's the kind of common thread tying them all together? Any ideas? What do all those theories have in common that we talked about on Tuesday? What were some? Name a couple of them. We've got framing. What else? Social learning. What else?
Uses and gratification.
Wait, what?
Uses and gratification.
Uses and gratifications. What else?
Cultivation.
Huh?
Cultivation.
Cultivation. What else?
Two-step? Or
Two-step flow. There's some more? Hypodermic needle. Yeah.
Magic bullet.
I've got a colleague who's teaching about September 11th today, and she's just realized that most of her students don't have clear memories of it. So the hypodermic needle theory, actually the mass society, because that was the last time media was massive. I mean, in the sense that masses were tuned into the same information. All right, so all these theories, any idea what they all have in common? No? No idea.
They like save people as far as their image. It's like ways of saving people as far as their image.
Can you explain some more?
Yeah.
I think you're getting somewhere, but I'd like to hear a little bit more if you have more.
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep chewing on that. Anybody else? All right, all those theories, I'm going to tell you, they all look at media as having an effect on audiences. Pretty simple, right? Media have an effect on audiences. Now, a lot of them account for other complexities of life, but that's kind of the basic thing is that the communication affects audiences. Well, here we get into relationship maintenance and relationship management theory, and we're in a paradigm shift. We start looking more at the relationship, not how communication affects the relationship. We look at communication more as a tool for fostering a relationship. Make sense? All right. But first I want to talk a little bit about persuasion and manipulation. What's the difference in persuasion and manipulation? What is it? How are these two things different?
I feel like persuasion is like the person is aware and you're getting them on your side in the right way, and manipulation is like they're unaware of what they're doing.
That is a pretty good way of putting it. I like that. So if you're manipulated, you're not exactly aware that somebody's kind of getting you to do something. But if you're being persuaded, you know what's up, and you have an active choice, right?
Is it persuasion can sometimes be for your benefit, whereas manipulation is for your other person's benefit?
Well, let's think about that. What do you guys think about that? Persuasion is for the persuadee's benefit or persuader. Persuadee, okay. Well, manipulation is for the persuader's benefit.
I think
You guys
it's
like that
right
one?
with manipulation, but persuasion, I think, can be either way. Because you can persuade someone to do something.
So you could persuade somebody to do something would result in a win-win. So you're onto something here. You're onto something. We'll get to that in just a second. Anybody else? Yeah, Terrence.
Persuasion is like getting someone to do something at their own will, and manipulation is getting them to do something at yours.
I like that. That fits with it. That works. So there's a choice in persuasion. Is that what you're saying? There's a choice.
Yeah.
Whereas manipulation is not choice or choiceless. All right, here's the definition we're going to go off of. Persuasion is an attempt to influence a person's actions through an appeal to their self-interest. We appeal to people's self-interest to try to persuade them. So that means that if you're practicing PR, you've got to know what your different audiences, what the different publics want to know, or what some of their, so what they value, what they're interested in. So I'm going to show you a video, and as you guys go through this PR program, just like the Lettingham article, this video you will see in several of my classes because I like it so much. It's my favorite video, behind Californication Season 3. You guys don't watch that, do you? You watch X-Files?
It's creeped me out.
Hold on a second. We got a volume problem. Oh, come on, volume.
Researchers have been studying the factors that influence us to say yes to the requests of others for over 16
You
years.
guys hear that?
And there can be no doubt that there's a science to how we are persuaded. And a lot of this science is surprising. When making a decision, it would be nice to think that people consider all the available information in order to guide their thinking. But the reality is very often different. In the increasingly overloaded lives we lead, more than ever, we need shortcuts or rules of thumb to guide our decision-making. My own research has identified just 6 of these shortcuts as universals that guide human behavior. They are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, and consensus. Understanding these shortcuts and employing them in an ethical manner can significantly increase the chances that someone will be persuaded by your request. Let's take a closer look at each in turn.
So, the first universal principle of influence is reciprocity. Simply put, people are obliged to give back to others the form of behavior, gift, or service that they have received first. If a friend invites you to their party, there's an obligation for you to invite them to a future party you are hosting. If a colleague does you a favour, then you owe that colleague a favour. And in the context of a social obligation, people are more likely to say yes to those that they owe. One of the best demonstrations of the principle of reciprocation comes from a series of studies conducted in restaurants. So the last time you visited a restaurant, there's a good chance that the waiter or waitress would have given you a gift, probably at about the same time that they bring you a bill. A liqueur perhaps, or a fortune cookie, or perhaps a simple mint. So here's the question. Does the giving of a mint have any influence over how much tip you're going to leave them? Most people will say no, but that mint can make a surprising difference. In the study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal typically increased tips by around 3%. Interestingly, if the gift is doubled and 2 mints are provided, tips don't double. They quadruple, a 14% increase in tips. But perhaps most interestingly of all is the fact that if the waiter provides 1 mint, starts to walk away from the table, but pauses, turns back, and says, "For you nice people, here's an extra mint," tips go through the roof. A 23% increase, influenced not by what was given,
Any
but
food
how
service
it was
people
given.
here?
So the key to using the principle of reciprocation is to be the first to give and to ensure that what you give is personalized and unexpected.
The second universal principle of persuasion is scarcity. Simply put, people want more of those things they can have less of. When British Airways announced in 2003 that they would no longer be operating the twice-daily London-New York Concorde flight because it had become uneconomical to run, sales the very next day took off. Notice that nothing had changed about the Concorde itself. It certainly didn't fly any faster, the service didn't suddenly get better, and the airfare didn't drop. It had simply become a scarce resource, and as a result, people wanted it more. So when it comes to effectively persuading others using the scarcity principle, the science is clear. It's not enough simply to tell people about the benefits they'll gain if they choose your products and services. You'll also need to point out what is unique about your proposition and what they stand to lose if they fail to consider your proposal.
Our third principle of influence is the principle of authority, the idea that people follow the lead of credible, knowledgeable experts. Physiotherapists, for example, are able to persuade more of their patients to comply with recommended exercise programs if they display their medical diplomas on the walls of their consulting rooms. People are more likely to give change for a parking meter to a complete stranger if that requester wears a uniform rather than casual clothes. What the science is telling us is that it's important to signal to others what makes you a credible, knowledgeable authority before you make your influence attempt. Of course, this can present problems. You can hardly go around telling potential customers how brilliant you are, but you can certainly arrange for someone to do it for you. And surprisingly, the science tells us that it doesn't seem to matter if the person who introduces you is not only connected to you, but also likely to prosper from the introduction themselves. One group of real estate agents were able to increase both the number of property appraisals and the number of subsequent contracts that they wrote by arranging for reception staff who answered customer inquiries to first mention their colleagues' credentials and expertise. So, customers interested in letting a property were told, "Lettings? Let me connect you with Sandra, who has over 50 years' experience letting properties in this area." Customers who wanted more information about selling properties were told, "Speak to Peter, our head of sales. He has over 20 years' experience selling properties. I'll put you through now." The impact of this expert introduction led to a 20% rise in the number of appointments and a 15% increase in the number of signed contracts. Not bad for a small change informed from persuasion science that was both ethical and costless to implement.
The next principle is consistency. People like to be consistent with the things they have previously said or done. Consistency is activated by looking for and asking for.
Just notice consistency. It's not just, we also look for consistency in other people. And as we get into relationship maintenance here in a little while, we're gonna see that a little bit more. When people are consistent, they're easier to predict. And when they're not consistent, we're less likely to trust them. And our relationships with them will suffer.
For small initial commitments that can be made. In one famous set of studies, researchers found, rather unsurprisingly, that very few people would be willing to erect an unsightly wooden board on their front lawn to support a Drive Safely campaign in their neighborhood. However, in a similar neighborhood close by, 4 times as many homeowners indicated that they would be willing to erect this unsightly billboard. Why? Because 10 days previously, they had agreed to place a small postcard in the front window of their home that signaled their support for a Drive Safely campaign. That small card was the initial commitment that led to a 400% increase in a much bigger but still consistent change. So, when seeking to influence using the consistency principle, the detective of influence looks for voluntary, active, and public commitments, and ideally gets those commitments in writing. For example, one recent study reduced missed appointments at health centers by 18%, simply by asking the patients rather than the staff to write down appointment details on the future appointment card.
The fifth principle is the principle of liking. People prefer to say yes to those that they like. But what causes one person to like another? Persuasion science tells us that there are 3 important factors. We like people who are similar to us. We like people who pay us compliments. And we like people who cooperate with us towards mutual goals. As more and more of the interactions that we are having take place online, it might be worth asking whether these factors can be employed effectively in, let's say, online negotiations. In a series of negotiation studies carried out between MBA students at two well-known business schools, some groups were told, time is money, get straight down to business. In this group, around 55% were able to come to an agreement. A second group, however, were told, before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other. Identify a similarity you share in common, then begin negotiating. In this group, 90% of them were able to come to successful and agreeable outcomes that were typically worth 18% more to both parties. So to harness this powerful principle of liking, be sure to look for areas of similarity that you share with others and genuine compliments you can give before you get down to business.
The final principle is consensus. Especially when they are uncertain, people will look to the actions and behaviors of others to determine their own. You may have noticed that hotels often place a small card in bathrooms that attempt to persuade guests to reuse their towels and linen. Most do this by drawing a guest's attention to the benefits that reuse can have on environmental protection. It turns out that this is a pretty effective strategy, leading to around 35% compliance. But could there be an even more effective way? Well, it turns out that about 75% of people who check into a hotel for 4 nights or longer will reuse their towels at some point during their stay. So what would happen if we took a lesson from the principle of consensus and simply included that information on the cards and said that 75% of our guests reuse their towels at some time during their stay? So please do so as well. It turns out that when we do this, towel reuse rises by 26%. Now imagine the next time you stay in a hotel, you saw one of these signs. You picked it up and you read the following message. 75% of people who have stayed in this room have reused their towels. What would you think? Well, here's what you might think. I hope they're not the same towels. And like most people, you probably think that this sign will have no influence on your behavior whatsoever. But it turns out that changing just a few words on a sign to honestly point out what comparable previous guests have done was the single most effective message, leading to a 33% increase in reuse. So, the science is telling us that rather than relying on our own ability to persuade others, we can point to what many others are already doing, especially many similar others.
So there we have it, 6 scientifically validated principles of persuasion that provide for small, practical, often costless changes that can lead to big differences in your ability to influence and persuade others in an entirely ethical way. They are the secrets from the science of persuasion.
All right. Any thoughts on that video? Science of persuasion. You know how to persuade someone now. This video is actually uploaded to D2L, so you can watch this at your leisure, and you'll also get to see it in my future classes. I forgot to mention something a while ago. PR Day in Houston is hosted by PRSA. It's October 8th. I'm canceling classes that day. That won't affect you guys, but I'm canceling classes. But if you guys would like to go, I am willing to write you a letter to get you out of classes on Wednesday for official SFA business, and I will give up to 2%. Well, I will give 2% extra credit to you guys. That's like having 2% of your grade given back to you at the end of the semester. That's a huge chunk of credit. Extra credit. What?
When is it?
October 8th. It's on a Wednesday. It's like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in Houston. Yeah. I tell you what, if you're interested in this, come see me in my office immediately after. So I got to get them a head count. They want SFA volunteers. I think you guys might get a free lunch out of the deal. Yes.
Because I was on the thing and it said that there's like beginning and then like lunch. Do you go all day?
Yeah,
I
it's,
know, like, I think
it does, and they are going to give us a break on the price. They're going to give us a good deal, and I think they want some volunteers. If we can get a strong SFA presence at this event, it's going to make it rain for us.
I know, like,
Is that the right word for it?
I don't know, but we should go.
Yes.
You go.
Go ahead.
I can't meet you in your office after this, so can we just say that we are interested now? 'Cause I have to run to our shoot.
Yeah, come back and see me in my office whenever you're done with whatever. Come see me the day before 2 o'clock. Can you do that?
No, I have class every, yeah, like.
Come see me tomorrow before noon.
Your son wanted it.
Question?
You need like a for sure head count by today.
I need it by Monday. I need it by Tuesday, actually. I need it by Tuesday, and they're hoping to get 10 people plus. Question? Okay. All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
You said it's in Houston?
It's in Houston, so you can just go down there on Tuesday if you live there, crash out, and then show up, and then leave and come back after the thing's over.
Do you pay or like how much is it? You pay to go?
I tell you what, we'll spend a little bit of time on Tuesday, and I'll get the details. Or I'll post it one to D2L and also two to our Facebook group. And so I'll give you guys some more details electronically, but we'll have a sit down on Tuesday and get a head count. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, then you don't have to come. You can come to my office. I'll tell you more about it afterwards. But okay, yeah, I forgot to mention that. Sorry to interrupt relationship management. We've got to move though, so let's get on back to this. You got the heads up though. And this is huge. I mean, if you have resumes, business cards, or any type of your own press kit. Anybody have their own press kit? You'll get one when you take my PR writing class. This is huge. You're gonna. I mean, if you come to this thing, you're gonna be meeting people that will want to hire you for PR purposes. So this is why I'm serious about giving extra credit and stuff. Anyway, let's move on. Manipulation. You guys have mentioned this in some form or another. The audience might need to know the message, but they're coerced or they're tricked into some kind of knowledge when there's not really any benefit to them. Propaganda is generally some kind of manipulation. And what happens whenever you manipulate people, they get pissed off at you. I mean, how many of you guys have been manipulated by somebody? How did that make you feel? Bad? Hey, what else? Disrespected, yes. What else? Used? Uh-huh. And you probably didn't like that very much. And the person that did that to you probably lost some credibility. Right? Not a credible person anymore. So, manipulating people in PR is bad. Alright, so, to persuade people, you need to understand that different publics have different needs. Different publics have different communication needs. They have different interests. They have different desires. And we will explore this more deeply when we go into the next large module, which is publics. After exam 1, we're going to dissect every single kind of public there is. Well, a lot of different kinds of publics. And look at communication needs, what kind of interests those publics have, desires, things like that. So, as PR practitioners, we need to be sensitive to the needs of our publics so that we can address them and try to come up with win-win situations, harmonize our actions, and try to set up situations, events, or processes or anything that benefits both the organization and the different publics in the public. We good on that? I'm going to throw out 4 models of PR. I believe this is in your Scitel books. There are 4 models. We can break them into 2 different types. There's one-way communication, which means communication flows in one direction. And there is two-way communication, which means communication can flow in 2 directions. Now, press agency, agentry, and propaganda, this is pretty much one-way communication. You see a flyer, you see these posters or something. This is one-way communication. We can't talk with the people who put these things up on the wall because they're not here. But they're telling us something, right? But we can't communicate back with them. That's press agentry. Then public information is more of a dissemination of information. We're going to talk more about public affairs at some point. A lot of public affairs are kind of set up that way, where they send out things to the masses. Then we get into two-way communication. There's two-way asymmetric and two-way symmetric. What is asymmetric? We already talked about this in here? That must have been a different class. Two-way asymmetric. Any guesses what two-way asymmetric communication might be?
Two-way, but it's like not the same. So maybe like you're getting a lot of information and they're not getting out back, or
Okay, it's unequal. It's unequal. Have you guys seen that Simpsons episode? Anybody watch The Simpsons? Nobody watches The Simpsons. What? Am I like old or something? Is it Simpsons for old people? Oh, it just sucks now. It's lost. It's not funny anymore. Okay. Well, the Simpsons. At the nuclear power plant, they have the suggestion box on the wall, right? And you put the employees go put the suggestions in the suggestion box, and then it goes down this long thing and feeds a fire, which heats the building. It's my favorite demonstration of two-way asymmetric communication, where there's the opportunity for feedback, but somebody might not necessarily be listening, or they might be listening but not doing anything about it. And two-way symmetric, this is where there are equal parts. This is where we have a dialogue going on between an organization and the public. Yeah.
Sorry, is the two-way asymmetric, would that be like you talking like in a classroom setting? Because some of us may not want to. Most of us is probably
Is
listening.
it two-way asymmetric? Yeah, probably.
Like that's like kind of an example.
Or any kind of thing where you got a presenter,
Okay.
or like me in this case, yeah, this is pretty asymmetric, I guess. But I do try to get your feedback and listen and things like that. I hope I did a good job. I don't know. I'm happy to answer questions or let you guys ask each other questions too. So yes, we are kind of, more or less, we lean towards asymmetric, but I try to do two-way. So yeah, and there are also blends of these different things too at times. That is a good point. Let's see what else we got here. As I mentioned, we're currently in a shift from looking at communication as kind of the basis of the things we do, to looking at relationships. Our goals can often become relationship-oriented as opposed to communication-oriented. So now, from here on out, I want you guys thinking about relationships. If you've had a significant other, or even with your friends, your relationships with your family, your interpersonal relationships, think about these things and use them as a model. Think how they would play out at a larger, higher level, at the organization, public level. Okay, so here's the importance of the relational concept. First off, for good public relations, for PR to work, relationships need to be central. Or they are central anyway, so they need to be acknowledged as such. Because whenever you have relationships with people, your goals will kind of crop up around those relationships. So you can meet those goals as they pertain to a relationship. Am I getting kind of sidetracked? Not sidetracked. Well, let's keep going here. We look at communication, we look at brochures, we look at press releases, all these types of things as basically strategic tools for achieving the goals associated with our relationships. Let's see. Measurement. Well, we'll get deeper into measurement here shortly. whenever we do PR campaigns, we always end up evaluating our work to make sure that we're doing good work, that our work is worthwhile. If it's not worthwhile, we can stop doing it. Does that make sense? If what you're doing is failing, then you need to stop doing what you're doing and do something different so that you can succeed in achieving your goals. Does that make sense? All right, so let's add on to that. We do a lot of measurement in PR as a part to help us evaluate our projects, but I'm trying to think. I've worded this, and I give myself a D+ for this slide presentation because it's so text heavy. So let's see. Yeah, the importance of measurement. I mean, it's going to be based on the ability for different initiatives to be able to impact the relationship objectives. That makes sense? Measurement, let me see if I can simplify this. Measurement's important. It needs to be reliable, it needs to be valid, and it needs to measure what it's supposed to measure. It needs to measure how close you get to achieving objectives associated with relationships. That came out better that time. Is that mind-boggling? Does that make sense? All right, we'll talk about measurement at a later date then. But let's move on. I want to get through as much of this as we possibly can so you guys can get on to the United Way project. All right, so relationship management. The first person to really crank this out was John Lettingham. I mean, again, this article that you were reading is probably the most important article written in PR in the past decade or past 15, 20, I'd almost go back 40 or 50 years. This is a serious article here. So there were 4 developments in public relations that led to the relational perspective. And one of those was that relationships the relationships kind of play a central role in public relations. We also began reconceptualizing PR as a management function, which means that PR people need to sit at the management table because remember, one of the functions of PR is translating publics to management and vice versa, translating management policies to publics, on the other hand. Does that make sense? Oftentimes PR people act as a translator. So we're sort of a management translator in a lot of ways. Ideally, let me put it this way. Ideally, other times PR is used as a marketing tool. But ideally, based on relational theory, PR should be a part of management. What else we got? Another development. Identification components and types. Okay, this is like different parts of relationships as well as types of relationships that we have between organizations and publics. And their linkage to public attitudes and perceptions, behaviors, and stuff like that. How publics feel about us. And we'll get into the types of relationships here in just a few minutes. Then the 4th development. Construction of what's a model? I'm talking about construction of organization-public relationship models that accommodate all this stuff. What am I talking about?
Like a mini plan or...
Yes, that is exactly what it is. It is like something that describes how stuff works. Like a diagram or something. Here's a model. What do we got? We got antecedents. What are some of the antecedents of a relationship? Give me 3 of them. What are some of the inputs that go into a relationship? Trust, I could go with that. Trust could be an outcome, or let's say, okay, it could be an outcome, or what else? Time, like a time known to somebody. Communication might be a good, might be. I'm going to put a big star next to that because that might actually be a process. What else? Another antecedent. How about needs or goals, desires, things like that. All right, so we got these antecedents. We go into this. We got some kind of process going on. What are some of the processes we could have? And I'm making this up on the fly. This is not like a real model here. I just want to show you what a model is. What is processing?
When can you put communication there?
That's why I'm saying you put a star next to it there, because I'm thinking communication is better here. Communication, interaction maybe. How about just attempts to meet needs? All right, so what are the consequences? We got this process. We've got trust, time known. We've got these antecedents going into this process. What might be some outcomes that we would see in a relationship?
Friendship.
Friendship. Okay, I'll go with that. What else? Or loyalty? We'll talk about loyalty in a minute, too. What else? Goals met? Or needs or goals met? What else? Understanding could go, and I'll bet you'd see a feedback loop between understanding and process. Could even end up being antecedent. What else? The future. Does this make sense? We got like inputs to go into a relationship. We got different processes, dynamics within a relationship. Then we've got outcomes of that processing of the antecedents. That's a model. All right. So people are constructing all kinds of these models out there that accommodate different stuff and explain how things work. So if you've got a model to operate off of, you can just stick to the model and use that as part of your PR plan for different publics. Does that make sense? If you understand how stuff works, you can work it to your advantage. That might be a PR principle I hadn't thought of. What do you guys think? Is that a PR principle? If you understand how stuff works, you can work it to your advantage. That's more of a principle of life. All right. Here are the assumptions of relationship management theory. We assume that the appropriate domain of public relations practice is in dealing with relationships with different publics. That one's pretty straightforward. It also provides an organizing concept for scholarship, teaching, practice. I mean, we can all identify with relationship management theory because we've all had relationships with another person. Friends, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, spouse, kids. I don't know if any of you got kids or not. We can latch on. It's easy to latch on to because we've all had relationships. At one point, Grunig and Hunt, these are a couple other names that you need to know. They shifted the emphasis. I mean, these guys are kind of the ones that shifted the emphasis from manipulating publics or communication, doing something to publics, to the notion of mutual benefits. They're big proponents of seeking out mutually beneficial relationships, win-win situations, things like that. So, a great quote, we're not so much about the message as we are about serving the public. All right, let's look at the dimensions. How much time we have? We have half an hour. All right, let's look at the dimensions of organization public relationships because there are many. First off, relationships that we have with people, they're going to predict our predispositions towards other people. If we have a bad relationship with somebody, then we can pretty much guess that our predisposition is going to be bad whenever we run into them on the street. Let's see. Does anybody have their article out with 17 dimensions? I don't know if it lists all 17. I think it does. Well, there's a ton of different dimensions in relationships. And these are pretty straightforward. We got trust, openness, involvement, some kind of investment in the relationship and a commitment. Anybody name any other dimensions of relationships that we should be aware of? You guys didn't read the article, did you? You better read that article. I'm going to pick like one tiny little question. I'm picking like 10 questions. That's what I'm doing. 10 questions. That's like 20% of the test. They're all going to be hard. They're all going to be like, you have to like read it and memorize it. That's what I'm going to do. All right. But do we at least get that concept here? That there are a lot of different dimensions of relationships. And we need to pay attention to all of them. You know, just in our daily lives with people we know, but also at the organization public level. So wait, where was loyalty on there? Loyalty was an outcome? Or outcome. Let's talk about loyalty. Whenever, first off, on those 17 dimensions, whenever our public has high rankings on all those dimensions regarding our company, they're more likely to use company services. That makes sense? It's people that like us are more likely to use our services. That's probably the simplest way to put it. The more involvement and the more support from the community that you get, or that you have, the more support you have for your community, it's going to create more loyalty as well. We could get into identity from here, but I don't want to right now because that gets complex. But it's pretty awesome. So just know that involvement and support in the community helps engender loyalty. Same goes also for internal publics, organization, or between management and workers or employees. Also for loyalty, relationships must be seen by both parties as mutually beneficial. It's hard to have loyalty whenever somebody's thinking you're ripping them off, or when you're thinking somebody's ripping you off. You want mutual benefits. But most importantly, loyalty is probably, this is an incredibly valuable asset, and it comes from a lot of different places. It should almost always be a PR goal, even if it's just an unwritten goal. But loyalty is a very valuable asset. What else do we have in relationships? We also have, in our relationships, we have expectations. Relationships, often defined by the expectations that we have for them, and our behavior associated with those expectations. The history of a relationship contributes to the current state of the relationship in terms of expectations. If you've watched somebody consistently do something, then you're going to expect them to continue to consistently do whatever that something is. Does that make sense? So you can damage relationships when you have an incongruence between organizations. Whenever people aren't on the same page, let's say that. An incongruence between organization and public definitions of a relationship. If you think a relationship is one thing, but your partner thinks a relationship is something else, you can create damage that way. Has that ever happened to anybody? Where you thought the relationship was one thing and they thought it was something else? You don't have to answer that. I think we probably all had that kind of thing, high school or at some point in our lives where we were with a partner, we just ended up with different ideas of the relationship and it ends up falling apart. Same thing happens at the organization public level. What could help prevent a damage from having different definitions of a relationship? Very good, communication. That's the word I was looking for. All right. Let's see what we have. Regarding organization public relationships, we're going to run out of time. Measuring relationship or relational outcomes is more important than measuring communication outcomes. Just because in this paradigm, in this type of thinking, from the relational perspective, communication is subordinate to the relationship. We value the relationship more than we do the communication. And because we value the relationship, our communication is going to reflect that value and try to achieve the goals that we have for the relationship. Lettingham also tells us the appropriate unit of measurement is the organization-public relationship. We're not looking at individuals and individuals. We're looking at how a bunch of people in a public think about a bunch of people in an organization. You get me? We're not thinking about how the PR person thinks about the journalist that they deal with. We're thinking about how the news organization thinks about the organization that the PR person works for. So we're not dealing in individuals. We're dealing in large chunks of data. Or we're dealing in large groups of people. Relationships, just like in our interpersonal relationships, has ongoing interchange of needs, expectations, and fulfillment. In other words, things change in relationships. We've got to adapt to them to hold on to those relationships. Let's see, let's move on. I forgot what was on page 188. All right, so as I mentioned before, whenever we measure relationships, the ratings of relationships can help define the state of the organizational relationship. Remember we had those 17 dimensions? Those are all, think of those as survey items. How, like, for example, what might, if we survey a public using those 17 dimensions, what might one of the questions be? Any idea? I'm losing you. You're all yawning and stuff. We'll get to our group activity in just a minute. How about this? How much do you trust that organization? Scale of 1 to 7. How much do you trust that organization? In the organization. I'm just saying. Well, yeah. Well, I'm not asking this. I'm throwing out questions that we put on a survey. That's what we're doing. How honest is that company? How open is that company with you about their goings on? Things like that. And so low ratings are going to suggest a poor relationship. High ratings are going to suggest a good relationship. We can also use such ratings whenever we measure them as predictors of what people are going to think in the future or how they're going to behave in the future. The different relationship types. This is on your assignment here in a second. We've got symbolic, behavioral, personal, professional, and community-related. And can anybody tell me what some of these are? Somebody name a symbolic relationship. Hold on. Somebody name a symbolic relationship. Or describe one.
Would your religion be one? Like faith?
How so?
I don't know, like the symbols, like the cross or something. I don't know.
These are symbolic. You're thinking of symbolism. Okay. All right. Let's move from there. I'm thinking in terms of diaspora type stuff. How about this? The United States, Southern Baptist Convention has a symbolic relationship with Israel, maybe, and that there might not be a lot of behavioral interaction, but there's a connection. Maybe not Southern Baptist. Pat Robertson's a huge Israel fan, right? Oh, this is complex. Hold on, Cindy, I have problems with this. So. Symbolic relationships. Symbolic relationships lack like behavior and a lot of interaction. So it's like, I don't know, up to here. Oh no, let's see. I'm gonna have to get back to you guys on this. Think of a good one. I was hoping you guys could come up with a good symbolic public organization relationship that might suffice as an example. We'll come back to symbolic at a later time. How about a behavioral relationship? This is where people are actually some kind of interaction. Hold on, let's double check. Like what?
I know it's like behavior relationship. Is that like someone feeding off someone else's attitude, or for like an example, like just to use Ferguson as an example, how
Okay.
the public is their attitude is reflecting the police's attitude or behavior. Like if the public they're doing peaceful type things, then the police come in with tanks and stuff. So
Okay.
if their behavior is that one way, then the public behavior is going to reflect that and start getting all violent and riot.
That would be a behavioral relationship in there, in that there's behavioral interactions, like symbolic things that somebody does are going to initiate behavior on the other's part, and vice versa. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of. All right. Well, so we'll leave symbolic and behavioral off exam 1. But they're. I need to get. We're going to get some examples, so I'm going to bring this back up on Tuesday. Get some good examples. They're like cases of these. Help them. What else we got? Other relationship types. We got personal, which would be interpersonal. That's the PR person, the reporter. We've got professional. Well, actually, that's probably professional. PR person, reporter. Then we've got community related, which could mean that we're refer to the connections with different members of the community, different community organizations, the Lions Club, stuff like that. All right, we're out of time on that part. I want to get to this activity, though, because this is an important activity. Here's what you're on the hook for, and I'll leave off symbolic and behavior, or the relationship types on the exam. But here's what you're on the hook for. These are the rest of the slides right here. Dynamics of organization and public relationships. And today's takeaway. Okay, yeah, you got one slide left, so.